Thanks so much for joining us this morning. So the last time we were actually scheduled a couple weeks ago for this Coffee Connect, but due to the crazy weather that we've been having, we had to reschedule it. So welcome, and again, thanks for joining us on SEBL, and we're going to talk a little bit on integrating and scheduling. I'm Jill Gunther. I am one of the social emotional behavioral learning specialists with Nebraska MTSS. And I currently serve Region 2 and 3. And I'm going to let the other two that are with us quickly introduce themselves this morning.
Chandra Essex. I'm the SEBL specialist for Region 4. So I work with ESUs 9, 10, 11, and 17.
Hey everyone, I'm Mackenzie Rydell. I am the SEBL for Region 1, which is ESU 4, 5, 6, and LPS.
Awesome. Thanks, ladies. And then just to start us off with our welcoming inclusion activity. So one of those 3 inclusive practices that we'll talk just a little bit about a little later as well. But this one comes from First 5, which is also linked in. You guys have probably, if you've joined us before, heard us talk about how wonderful the First 5 is as a resource. But what does your alarm clock look like? So I feel like it kind of depends on what the day is like, but we have a couple different pictures there. So that first one has lots and lots of different alarms. So are you that person? Are you just that one alarm kind of person? Or are you a I just wake up when I need to wake up kind of person? So you can put a 1, 2, or 3 in the chat.
I will put in the chat. Well, I'm not going to put in the chat, but I will say that I'm definitely a 1, especially this morning. We had a late basketball game last night. For those that know, boys are starting sub-districts or district play. So we had a late basketball game last night. So I had multiple alarms this morning.
Yes, absolutely. It looks like we got a few 1s in there. Kind of got a variety. We got some 2s, we got some 3s. Yes, Mackenzie, I'm with you. Never on like the even time, so never on a 30 or a o'clock, right? Like it's always like 6:06 or something like that. So I'm with you. All right. Well, thank you everybody for participating in that. Just a quick reminder here as well that we do have our Padlet of resources. So we have some new resources that we've added to the Padlet on integrating SEBL and scheduling. And then we just have some general SEBL resources and then all of our previous Coffee Connects as well. So if you go to that Padlet, password MTSS, tons and tons of links available there. And then just to kind of get us started there, we always like to start with a quote. This is a great one. I'll give you a second to read that. But really thinking about just that integration piece, really thinking about how important those social, emotional, behavioral learning skills are to really contributing to that well-rounded individual and really thinking about that college, that career, that community readiness piece for each and every one of our students. So a great one just kind of start us off. So what is social emotional behavioral learning? Again, if you guys have been with us before, we always like to start off with just that definition of SEBL. So really thinking about that systematic process, working to foster those social, those emotional skills so we can really create those safe, those supportive, those welcoming environments for both students as well as staff. We have our social emotional behavioral learning skills star with kind of those different categories of skills. And we're going to kind of dig in today of just some different ways that we really work to target those skills within the classroom setting. And then this is just a nice piece of really taking each of those categories of skills, but then dividing it up as we think about those employability skills. So lots of different resources here kind of pulled together of those skills that employers are looking for in their employees. And then we have it divided out here by each of those skill set areas. So again, a great resource to use with students when we're really thinking about being explicit in that language that we're talking about, those social emotional behavioral learning skills. And then kind of all of these pieces, right, fall into social emotional behavioral learning. So you might hear a lot of these. So thinking about restorative practices, thinking about PBIS, comprehensive school mental health, the pyramid model. So all of those we're really targeting those social emotional behavioral learning skills. And we do all of that really within the MTSS framework. So when we think about MTSS, a lot of times our mind kind of shifts to that layered continuum of support, kind of that one essential element. But MTSS is really so much more, right? Yes, that layered continuum of support and how we're supporting students, especially around that social emotional behavioral learning, is an important component, but really thinking about that database decision making, thinking about that infrastructure and shared leadership, and then that communication and collaboration. That's really what makes up that multi-tiered system of support. And we're really going to be talking about how we're targeting that SEBL specifically within that MTSS framework. So the why, okay? So the why of integrating SEBL. Why is it important? So really thinking about when we're targeting SEBL, just kind of in isolation, we're really not providing those opportunities for practice, for that generalization to lots and lots of other settings. When we're integrating social emotional behavioral learning, really across the curriculum and kind of just those teachable moments and what we do each and every day, we're providing those opportunities. We're providing those connections to really take those skills and apply them in everyday experiences. We could have made this next slide multiple slides, right? So many different ways when we think about really kind of identifying what some of those benefits are for students when we think about that integration. These are obviously just a few, not an exhaustive list by any means, but just some of those pieces that we think about that we're really working to target when we're integrating SEBL. So if you take a look at these, really kind of match up with our skill star as well. So if you've seen our expanded skill stars for each of the different categories, a lot of these just come from here, and we could have really added all of the rest of them either. But really thinking about how we're working to engage student voice, how we're working to support students to work on those relationships, establishing those relationships, maintaining those relationships, how we're targeting empowering students to understand and show empathy towards others, to identify goals and to work to achieve those goals, what those steps are to achieve those goals. So lots of different ways when we think about all of the different benefits. So some different ways to promote SEBL, we can kind of think about it as that classroom level, that school-wide level, and that community level. When we're thinking about classroom-wide level, we're targeting lessons, right? What do our lessons look like and how are we really working to teach SEBL within those lessons? We are also thinking about that adult modeling and what our existing academic content is and how we can really kind of bring in some of those other skills as well. For that second one there, so for school-wide, that's going to be things like our expectations or our values that maybe we have identified school-wide. Also, any of like the prevention programs would also really fall within that school-wide piece. The community level is any of our extracurriculars and our service learning. Really, through all of those, we are targeting some of those social emotional behavioral learning skills. It's really just thinking about how we can be explicit and intentional with those pieces. So we just kind of wanted to lay that out there to really kind of get us thinking about some examples of each of those different levels. Okay, so getting into SEBL instruction and kind of those three different areas. So environmental is one, explicit is another, and embedded is that third one. So we're going to kind of dig into each one of these as it pertains to that SEBL instruction. So the first one is environmental, and it's really those supportive classroom practices, identifying some of those procedures, those strategies, anything that we're doing to really help students feel welcomed, feel heard, feel safe, and kind of building that community. That second one there is explicit. We'll talk a little bit about that, but that's really kind of identifying those specific skills. Maybe it's an identified time to work to target those explicit skills, but how we're really engaging our students to build that SEBL capacity. And then the third one that we're going to talk about is that embedded, where we're really taking advantage of those teachable moments. We're really working to embed SEBL within our core instruction. Also thinking about some of those SEBL pieces where we're really kind of making those connections and building in those strategies for SEBL within the lessons that we're teaching. So those are kind of those three main areas. The first one that we're going to dig into just a little bit more is environmental. And so, like I mentioned, really kind of how we organize, how we manage our class. Some of you might start off with morning meetings. We're going to talk a little bit about circles next month. That's also a great environmental practice. So really kind of how we're building that community, building that sense of belonging for our students as well as our staff. So we'd love to know, you can certainly unmute or drop it in the chat. What are some things that you guys think of or some things that you're already doing in your building that might be some examples of those environmental practices for SEBL? So any of those routines, any of those strategies that you're doing to really help students feel welcome, to feel heard, to feel safe. So if anybody's feeling brave, you can certainly unmute or drop it in the chat. Yeah, most definitely. So thinking about those circles, right? Proactive circles, greeting students at the door. Yes, so many fun ways that we can have those greetings at the door. Going back to that first five, they have an idea every single day for a positive greeting at the door. First five, yes, awesome resource there. Morning meetings, having those school-wide expectations. Absolutely. Identifying those within the classroom. Yes, check-ins, all amazing ways to really kind of target that environmental SEBL. Thank you for sharing those, everybody. So we've talked a little bit about those three inclusive practices. A couple of you mentioned those in the chat. Absolutely, those three inclusive practices, those welcoming inclusion activities, any of those engaging practices that we're doing throughout our class time, throughout our day, within our building even, and then those optimistic closures. Those are a great environmental practice. We're really helping to build that supportive environment where we're working to establish that safety, that predictable environment. We're building those connections, and then we're giving that opportunity for all voices to be heard as well. Obviously, we're working to really intentionally and explicitly kind of build those habits of practice through those three inclusive practices as well. Affective language, another great example of one of those environmental practices. So thinking about some of those, a couple of you mentioned proactive circles, community building circles, absolutely. Affective language is something that we talk a little bit about in our foundational restorative practices training as well, but really using this language to kind of really just kind of build that bar, right? So affective statements, really working to build those expressions of feelings and how we're responding to others' behavior. We're really working to separate the deed from the doer. So the behavior from the student, from the adult, whatever that might be. So another great way or another great strategy when we're thinking about some of those environmental SEBL practices and how we're building those in. Again, some of you mentioned those circles. Yes, absolutely. Next month, so our March Coffee Connect, we're going to dig into some of the SEBL skills that we can really work to target through circles at that tier 1 core level. So we didn't want to give it all away, but we wanted to bring in circles as another idea of some of those environmental practices. And here we have outlined those critical features of a circle. And so kind of thinking about those pieces of sitting in that physical circle, having that intentional opening. So how we're starting off that circle, having those agreed upon norms, using some sort of talking piece, providing that opportunity for all to share. So going through those rounds, having that option for passing and providing that option for passing, and then having that intentional closing as well. The also big thing with the circle that we have noted there, so circles typically go in that sequential order as well. So another kind of critical feature of circles. But we're going to talk a little bit more about those next month. But like I said, we wanted to just mention those as just another example of those environmental practices. All right. Here are a couple resources for you. So we wanted to kind of make those connections, connecting to those instructional frameworks. And so we wanted to just provide these 2 resources here. So there is a Marzano framework one, and then there's the Danielson framework one. But really thinking about some of those different tier 1 classroom practices around SEBL, and then making those connections to each of those different frameworks. So again, just kind of wanted to pop those in there as something you can kind of take a look at as we're thinking about some of those different SEBL practices as well. And then to kind of close our piece on environmental, so thinking about some just guiding questions, some possible questions that you might use with your team as you're thinking about how do we really work to bring in some of those environmental SEBL practices? What does this look like for us? And so we just wanted to lay some of those out here. There are a couple links embedded within as well. But thinking about how you might use a survey and then kind of taking a look at some of those survey results. What does that mean for your building? What are some action steps moving forward where we might be able to kind of work to strengthen some of those environmental practices? Another link on some classroom agreements. So when we're establishing those norms, those expectations, what that can look like. Just some other reflection questions around that building that supportive classroom environment, what it looks like, what it sounds like, kind of those steps that we can take as a team to kind of really build that into our classrooms. So again, just kind of something for you guys as a think about or something to take back to your teams. Again, here, just a few additional reflection questions. So thinking about different ways that you might stay calm, different ways that you might support yourself when things are feeling challenging. When we're modeling those things, all part of things that we're bringing into the environment as well. But we're really able to teach students some of those skills through that modeling. How we're following those classroom procedures, different steps we might identify to build upon that. How the classroom culture is, if it's supporting, if it's detracting. So again, things that we wanted to offer as takebacks for team meetings. All right, that brings us back into the second SEBL practice. So thinking about the explicit. So when we think about explicit, like I had mentioned, a lot of times we're thinking about those specific lessons where we're targeting specific skills. We're really working to actively engage students and growing their SEBL capacity. So we wanted to just bring in, since a lot of times when we think about explicit SEBL instruction, we might think about what does this look like for lessons? A lot of schools are often curious about what are some popular SEBL curriculums that are used across the state. A couple of years ago, our SEBL team did a survey. So districts completed the survey. We had a few questions just around SEBL. So we wanted to kind of bring in, again, I know we've shared this information with some of you, but I know it's always helpful to kind of think about what are some that are being used across the state in terms of SEBL curriculums. And so we have outlined here just what some of those responses were. So if the team that completed the survey indicated that yes, they do use an SEBL curriculum, then they identified what that curriculum was. And so we just kind of have it outlined here, some of the curriculums that more schools identified as using. But we also wanted to bring in, so not only thinking about some of those that might be used across the state, but obviously you want to match up what your needs are specific to your building, specific to your district, and what curriculum might match that the best. So our Nebraska MTSS program comparison tool is a great way to do that. You're able to do lots of different filtering by maybe skills that you're looking to target. There's a nice little direction sheet that we have linked on here that explains some of the different filters that are available through the program comparison tool. Kind of how to use that if that's something that your building or your district is looking at in terms of looking for some of those different curriculums that might be out there and what might be the best fit for you. These are a few other tools, again, kind of around finding those evidence-informed practices. So in addition to our Nebraska MTSS program comparison tool, lots of others are out there. And by no means are we recommending like, yes, you need a curriculum or these are the ones that you might look towards. We just wanted to offer some of the different ones that are used across the state. And then those helpful tools that you're able to kind of match up what your needs are. So definitely some links here to check out as well if that's something that your team is looking at. Next up, when we're thinking about explicit, that scheduling really comes into play as well. So thinking about what does this mean for us for our master schedule right now? How might we kind of build some of that explicit SEBL time into our master schedule? So we wanted to offer some examples, some resources around this, because it's important to think about a variety of different ways that that could look in your schedule and how it could potentially be done. Again, one of these might not directly kind of match what your needs are, but it gets you kind of thinking about what some different ways are that we could arrange the schedule. Now, looking here, these are kind of more like secondary based examples. But when we're thinking about different ways, it could be like an SEL, SEBL specific period within our day. Maybe it's a split period with another class. Maybe it's an advisement period, identifying kind of that specific time where we're building in those specific lessons, or maybe it's like a whole grade circle. So just some different ways that you can think about what scheduling could look like potentially. And in addition to that, we have a few other just links for you, both for elementary ideas as well as middle and high school ideas. And so we have those linked in there. So a couple of them are secondary. We also have the NDE Elementary Instructional Planning Guide, which has lots of different schedule examples embedded within that link as well. So definitely some to take a look at if you guys are having conversations around what could our master schedule look like? How might we fit in some explicit time for SEL, for maybe our for our circle times, whatever that might be. So we wanted to offer up some of those examples. And then lastly, just like we did that environmental piece. With explicit, we wanted some possible guiding team reflections that you might be able to bring back to help guide those discussions as well. So really thinking about how we might extend maybe what the identified SEBL instruction or lesson was. How are we going to, what's that going to look like throughout the week? Maybe it's a specific topic that is the weekly topic within your building. What skills are we explicitly targeting through that? What might we think is going to be a little bit more challenging with the specific lesson? So really kind of pre-planning and kind of thinking about some of those different pieces, the challenges that might come up, maybe afterwards even reflecting on what went really well, adjustments for next time, and even as team members thinking about what they might be most confident in teaching those social and emotional skills.
Thank you,
All right.
Joe. It's great covering the first two, environmental and explicit. So now we want to touch on embedded, and this is where we embed our social emotional behavioral learning into the instruction. It's a powerful way for students to connect and engage with that learning that's happening. And it just gives students opportunity to practice, to reflect on social emotional competencies in a way that develops their skills academically and social emotionally. So when we think about this, we want to talk about the key steps to that successful embedding. And it's thinking through step one, that we identify and explain the SEBL skill that you're going to focus on. Then we want to look at identifying the academic objective and what that topic is. Identify your SEBL lesson objective, and then create that fun and engaging integrated lessons. So keeping students engaged in that meaningful activity helps reinforce that SEL competency that you're teaching. So for lessons where you might be integrating that responsible decision making, consider an activity like creating a classroom contract. The process of collaborating with students to establish an expectation helps create a classroom environment where everyone's ideas matter. When we think about how we focus on objectives, almost all in any classroom activity becomes an opportunity to integrate that SEL competency. So great opportunities for connection. So we're going to dive a little bit into the SEBL skills, and then we're going to look at standards and how you can connect those directly to SEBL skills. So also we want to talk about when we think of ELA and SEBL, some of those skills students rely on are analyzing and understanding that text. The analyzation, that's a key SEBL skill. Developing strong vocabulary. Again, development. Critical thinking skills happens through everything we do inside and outside of the classroom. So helping embed that and being intentional and that connection will help as they build those skills. And then perspective taking and communication. Again, all of those skills are important for SEBL balance, and it helps with that intentional academic components. So first off, we want to think about also, we talked about ELA, then we want to think about math and SEBL. Students who struggle with math need strong social emotional skills so they can persevere through those challenging problems. Self-efficacy is a particularly important skill for math since students need to have confidence in their ability. Students also need that strong analytical, evaluation, and reflective skills so that they're equipped to handle increasingly complex exercises. Relationships and stress management skills are also important since students need to be able to de-escalate their stress level when they get frustrated and ask for help if they get stuck. So when we think about that, we want to make sure that you're directly connecting that math to SEBL. I know multiple times when my kiddos are home and we're working through math, there might be some frustration happening. So helping them take a deep breath, helping them get grounded, helping them know how to work through that are intentional skills that make that connection to SEBL. Science and SEBL is a powerful way to get students excited about science, is helping them understand the many ways that science sustains and improves our everyday lives. And some of those SEBL skills that rely on science include that problem solving, evaluation and analytical skills, social engagement, teamwork, and community building and involvement. Just the curiosity that comes through science is a great connection to SEBL. We want to get curious about our environment and know how that connection to our social and emotional selves, and how does that impact our behavior. Teaching SEL alongside your core content will not only deepen the students' engagement and learning, but will also help students develop that non-academic skills they need to be successful in life. Trying out these ideas, having fun activities and additional ways to integrate SEL in your core curricula is really where that deepening happens. If we, as we talked about earlier, that Jill mentioned, that connection to those career and technical experiences and that readiness, that career readiness that our employers want to see in our students, embedding those into the academics that are happening will just help strengthen the student skills and be a better future employee for our communities. And when we think about social studies and SEBL, SEBL supports that social studies instruction because it engages students in learning and deepening their understanding of the academic material. When we think about SEBL skills that students rely on in social studies, those will look at perspective taking, appreciation for inclusion, empathy, communication, and that social engagement. Again, these skills are embedded, then it's not just one more thing on the plate, it is the plate, and it's a part of everything that we're doing in the classroom when we embed SEBL, and we're intentionally pulling those skills out as we're doing our academic lessons. So we want to connect that embedded components to our SEBL skills that Jill mentioned earlier. So we're going to dive a little bit into each of our skills. So for self-awareness, we want to start a lesson with a check-in. Provides maybe that opportunity for students to practice that self-awareness, understand how self-awareness affects behavior and decision-making, and allows educators to gain that sense of a student's emotions at the entry point to learning. Connection for self-awareness is so key because I believe our students sometimes are not aware of what is happening outside and how that is impacting who they are. So explicitly sharing why you're asking your students to do a certain SEBL activity can be even more powerful when you place it within the context of our 5 SEBL skills. And to be intentional on how to plan that SEBL skill in your instructional strategy and in your lesson so that you verbalize those directions to the students. You make that direct connection. So one example might be, has anyone used the check-in starter screen from, I'm sorry, that. So one of the things to think about is if you've used a check-in starter screen from Demos or SEL templates from Pear Deck, these are models that educators can adopt and allow students to engage. So thinking about how you're making those direct correlations is really important. The next SEBL skill we want to talk about is self-management. So we ask the question, how can I be my best self for self-management? That's the question that we ask. You can work to activate these skills of self-management through guiding students towards goal setting, defining actionable steps to achieve those goals, and assisting in keeping track of when those assignments are due and supporting that time management. Being explicit to say, when you set a goal based on today's target, we will be working on self-management to achieve it. Again, that intentional connection is key. Problem solving. I will say problem solving is something that you will see in every single lesson that you're doing, and is an easy, direct connection. Educators can engage that problem solving process skills with students by co-creating rules, expectations, those values, and connecting those rules and expectations to the problem solving skill. What are you doing in math to solve this problem? What are you doing in science? How do you know what the problem is in the text of the characters are trying to solve in the story? Is there a problem? Or what are they doing to connect that relationship? How are they evaluating those consequences, making those decisions? Those are all problem-solving components that are easy connections to make in that academic text. Pro-social behaviors. A key way that educators can promote skills of pro-social behavior is through teaching perspective taking. So your perspective is different than my perspective. How do we have a discussion about different perspectives in a way that builds that skill? Discussing different strategies. So maybe it's solving a math problem from talking through various approaches, sharing how other might see things differently. So you do this maybe in an academic lesson in a circle, so that everybody can talk about how their perspective might be a little bit different, how they're looking at building that skill and why, explaining why that's different. So building and knowing that knowledge of what others in the room is happening builds that pro-social skill, because you're always asking, how can I support others? Relationships is our last SEBL skill that we want to address, and thinking about the question we always ask is, how can I connect with others? Educators can promote relationships in their academic skills through those purposeful groupings of instructional strategies, providing those conversation prompts, and then again, using those circles, morning meetings, 3 inclusive practices, icebreakers, community building activities, any opportunity that you're giving students to interact with each other and to build that relationship. And being intentional to verbalize and having students interact and encourage those skills together by saying, I'm pairing you up so that we can develop your communication, your collaboration, your relationship skills. Again, remembering to make those direct connections. So we wanted to give you some examples at elementary, middle school, and secondary high school of looking at a standard and then making that direct connection. So we've tried to bold on the screen and the slide of the lesson what direct connection to our SEBL skills it might be. So in math, you're looking at relationships, you're solving subtraction problems, you're making those connections. And that would be a direct connection to relationships and problem solving skills. ELA, explain how key details support that idea. Explain the relationship between the individuals and the historical. So again, they're looking at problem solving, relationship, and pro-social behaviors. And then a great resource that we found that facilitates the social, emotional, academic development. So SEED, through that close relationship, close reading of complex text. This is a document that we found on the NDE website in regards to literacy and making that direct connection from the 2021 standards for ELA. So thinking about how that looks, and it directly connects of how you're building those social, emotional, and academic development in ELA and literacy. So if you look here, it says, include perspective talking, think and feel to support the understanding of emotions and thoughts. Empower students to monitor their own comprehension and fluency through that cycle of action and reflection. And this ties into every single one of our SEBL skills when we think about ELA and this resource, because it's making that direct connection to all 5 of our skills. So in middle school, we looked at math, grade level 7. And so again, it's solving problems, applying properties of operation as strategies for problem solving. Again, generate a list of possible outcomes for simple events. So what does that look like? That's a direct connection to self-management, to relationships, and to problem solving. Social studies, we're comparing and contrasting, better understanding of multiple perspectives. And those are connected to pro-social behavior. And again, in ELA, we looked at grade bands 6 through 8, talking about those collaborative conversations, the critical thinking skills, perspective taking, and thinking and feeling to support understanding and emotions and thoughts. And that again ties to all 5 of those skills. So thinking as you're planning your lesson, what are the key words in the standard that you're addressing through your academic lesson, and pulling those components out to make the direct connection. Math, analyzing, model, and solving real world problems. Conclusions with valid arguments. Connects to self-awareness, problem solving, pro-social behavior skills. In physical science, We're thinking of how we're going to analyze, and we're going to look at the solutions that account for the societal needs and wants in that lesson. And that's directly connection to problem solving, relationship, and pro-social behaviors. And again, dived into ELA and literacy, looking at the grade band 9 through 12 through variety of text-dependent writing and speaking and performance and multiple media tasks. You're looking for students to express their comprehension of the information and their knowledge and their skills. Establishing student discussion protocols to facilitate that evidence-based discourse. How do we have productive struggle? How do we have that evidence-based discourse and support that active listening? Valuing those diverse perspective and insights and giving students the opportunity for that voice and definitely having responsibility. And so again, that is tied to all of our SEBL skills to pull them out. So just like the other sections, what we have done is here's a list of possible guiding questions that your staff can walk through as they're thinking about how to connect. So what are the lesson objectives for next week? What SEBL objectives can you include? Which SEBL skills did you encourage students to use in their academic learning this week? How did you use those skills to support their learning are questions you can ask. And then having teachers complete that first page in the SEL and the classroom self-assessment is a great place to have them do that self-review of where they're at in connecting academic lessons to SEBL. All of these questions come from the resources at the bottom of the page, that facilitating SEBL discussions, and is a great resource to use as you're building that. So the SEBL specialist created learning skills flyers for staff to use and breaking down what these skills look like by not only asking the question for each skill, but also of the 4 areas, breaking those down even more so that you can easily try to identify the connection between what's happening in your academic lesson to what the SEBL skill is building. So this is a great resource that you can use. You can print them off and have them in your classroom. You can put them up in your teachers' lounges just to have that continual reminder. We also created a resource for social emotional behavioral skills at home that you can print off and you can send home with students so they can look and those parents can see where are the strategies, where are the things that are happening outside of the classroom at home and how you can make that direct connection.
Hey, Chandra, can you go back to that last slide?
Maybe.
So, we've done an activity in the past where we take that SEBL star and we have staff, mainly staff like teachers in a classroom, take the star and take their curriculum guide or some of the standards they're going to be working on in the near future and try to make that explicit connection with what are some of those skills that I'm probably already targeting and how can I see that connection to what the SEBL skill is and then make it a little bit more explicit. So it's a really cool activity just to kind of connect the dots because a lot of the times like teachers are doing this work unknowingly and they have activities and such embedded into their curriculum, or as Chandra just went over, like there's so many standards that you can see those connections if you're really like thinking about it. And so it would be a really good activity to do if you're wanting to help staff make those connections more easily, to pull that resource, that classroom resource, and then have them look at their curriculum guides and make those explicit connections.
Thank you, Mackenzie, for making that point. Yeah, and if that's an activity that you're interested in having our assistance on, any one of the SEBL specialists would be willing to help you with that. So this is a resource I don't want to play, so I'm hoping it doesn't, but this is a great video when you have some time to watch, because we don't have time this morning to show this, but a great resource that talks about that school and classroom strategies to integrating the SEBL and the academic learning lesson. This was put on by Castle, and so just a great resource to work through. Okay. So we tried what now? So again, walking through how we can help with this, we have a protocol that we can do. We can help you walk through how you're doing this direct connection. And we would love to be thought partners with you as your teams around implementing SEBL into your MTSS system. So anyone from our regional teams, our SEBL specialists, we want to help be your thought partners. We want to help walk through that with you. And we have a great number of resources. So again, like on the screen, you're looking at maybe the dilemma is our staff seems to love the idea of that integration, but nothing seems to be happening in reality. So what can I do to capitalize on this school's interest so that we can translate those ideas into practice? And then background information, that evidence, like nothing seems to be happening. Why do you think staff love the idea, but maybe it's not being implemented? What have I tried so far to support that implementation? So being intentional in that thought process and walking through that. And our staff is happy to help. Our team is happy to help you walk through that. Your regional teams are happy to help you walk through that and to make those direct connections. So we've shared a lot of information with you today, and Jill and I probably flew through it a little bit because we were wanting to make sure that we got everything to you in our time frame together this morning. So thank you so much. If you have to go back and review this, what Coffee Connect, we encourage you to do that. There's a lot of resources in the PDF that are on the tablet or on the Padlet. Make sure and utilize those and implement those, and then reach out to our team for any help and assistance. So we would appreciate your feedback. We'd love to see how these topics are impacting you. And this is the information that we definitely use in planning for next year and in addressing how these Coffee Connects are meeting the needs of our educators in the state. So you can click on that exit ticket. Our next Coffee Connect is March 19th, and we are talking about using circles as a tier 1 support, which Jill mentioned a few times throughout our training today, as we were talking about that environmental component for integration of SEBL. So again, here is the QR code, and again, what are the dates that we have upcoming? Some other resources that we have. We are implementing foundational restorative practices across the state. If you or your districts are interested in this, here's some more information. You can also contact your SEBL specialist, as we'd love to get districts engaged and involved in this training, in this practice across the state. We also have our upcoming trainings for the rest of the spring semester. So in March, we have check in, check out, and our Coffee Connect. And then in April, we're looking at tier 2 and beyond check in, check out. And we have a variety of Coffee Connects that are coming up with some great topics for school safety and mental health literacy. So join us and make sure that you let us know that you're interested. So we're excited to announce our MTSS Summit road trip. So we're navigating literacy on the MTSS highway. It'll be again in Kearney at the conference center. And it is October 9th and 10th. So mark your calendars. We're already taking thoughts for programs and looking for people that are interested in presenting at the summit. So make sure that you join us and mark it on your calendars. So as always, the 3 practices we have are optimistic closure. So if you want to put it in the chat or you just want to reflect yourself, how optimistic are you feeling about your ability to contribute to a positive change today? So are you a 1, doubtful, 2, nervous, 3, hopeful, 4, motivated, or 5, confident? Thanks, Chantel, for putting in the chat that you're a 5. You're confident as you move forward. I would say today I'm a 4. I'm very motivated, but I am a little tired. We've had some with basketball and a lot of other great programs happening across the state. Been doing a lot of travel, so I'm a little tired today, but very motivated in moving forward. So Angie, thanks for jumping in and saying a 4. That motivated is really a key component. So good luck today, and hope that you all were able to grab some nuggets of information from how you can integrate social emotional behavioral learning into your schedules and into your academic classrooms and your lessons. So here is information again about our SEBL specialists. The one that we didn't mention is Sarah. She's for Region 5, and she covers ESUs 13, 15, and 16. So thank you for joining us today, and we hope that you have a great rest of your morning.